Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Razor Technology and NetApp's journey to the cloud. Today, I'm Brian Aiton with Razor Technology, and I'm joined with Mike Walsh and Chris Rodriguez from NetApp to talk about some tools that you might not have been exposed to or thought of when it comes to NetApp and its traditional storage technologies. Over the past few years, they've invested in a lot of development and acquisitions of some companies that brought some new features to their portfolio. But before we dive into that, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about Razor, specifically why we're here, why we exist, a little bit about what we do, and how our story kind of dovetails in with NetApp, who's been one of our closest partners for the past 15 or so years. But NetApp and Razor, we started working together a while back, and the one thing that we've all seen is a lot of change in the technology landscape. There's been a lot of disruptions, and I'm sure we've all seen them here recently, felt them in our organizations as we've had to come up with new work from home strategies, different ways to secure our organizations, so on and so forth. But it really didn't take away from our requirements to be able to run our business, and from technology folks help support initiatives and help companies curb the bottom line and help us grow the top line. So if you kind of look at some of the things that are up here on the screen, where some of these struggles and challenges live with adoption of new technologies, where the money is being spent on infrastructure versus innovation, and the roles that we're playing with business strategy and helping us find better ways to engage our client base and grow the business, and being a technology leader. There's just so much change that's going on from that perspective. And the main piece that's driving this is solid, talented people, and being able to help us have a positive impact for our companies and the challenges that we face. So when you look at Razor, you think about us, we're helping companies in all of those ways, and we're doing so with specific traditional IT theories, and just modernizing the tools that we're using and the talents that we're bringing forth. We're spending a lot of time learning about new technologies. We're helping companies understand how to measure and manage their environments, and we're bringing to bear lots of different expertise and helping companies kind of protect themselves from a wide range of vulnerabilities that are out there. And when we think about that, from those broad terms, we're obviously delivering things in a more tangible mechanism. So we're always focused around this transformation. Today, you look at our managed service portfolio, we're helping augment existing teams with different skills, or freeing up time by taking on certain tasks for organizations so their own IT teams can focus on the things that may help grow the top line for them, right? And you look at the things that we're able to help manage, or the tasks that we're overtaking from just simple things like backing up, or managing a server infrastructure, or helping bring eyes to network traffic. Those are the day-to-day operational things that we're helping with helping companies transform themselves so they can focus in different areas. Conversely, on the other side of on the other side of the circle here, you can see how we're helping companies on the far side of their business, helping them grow with, you know, the assessment work, helping them develop those strategy roadmaps of where they want to take their team, their their um, their infrastructure, where they want to take their tools, how they want to develop platforms to better engage their clients, and how they want to, reduce the overall management of their environments by moving into the public cloud, and you know offload some of those, again, day-to-day tasks of maintaining environments. So when you think of us, we're doing a lot of these pieces that really drive some of the conversations that we just talked about in the last slide. And as we kind of start to work with our partner NetApp, you'll see some of their point pieces, like that we talked about, the work for home environment, where we'll talk about how we are able to rapidly work with NetApp to, deploy virtual desktops so that companies can securely and easily managed um, bring their workforce to working from home environments. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mike to take you through some of the modern workplace pieces that NetApp is doing from a hybrid cloud standpoint.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks to our friends at Razor for the coffee. Really enjoyed it this morning. I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm on my second cup, so definitely helps get through the end of the week here. I think Brian highlighted one of the things that is changing about NetApp, because you hear the word NetApp and you almost always think storage right away. But our last 3 or 4 years, we're starting to look at our capability to help customers with their IT problems and specific use cases. And more these days, although we have a very strong presence, and C-Rod will talk about it on premises, there's a lot of companies in what I would call IT transition, as you saw on the slide there. The ability to deploy applications and solve business problems with the traditional model of buying gear and then applying that gear to a specific location, and then building your applications and your user and security around that, is changing significantly, with the public clouds becoming more prominent in a lot of these workflows and a lot of these IT decisions. So NetApp is following that particular business imperative and providing the capability in our tool sets to help optimize that, because the high-end value of these public clouds is we have the capability to deploy in a very flexible manner. We get to deploy it as an operational expense because they charge us for what we use, and we have the ability to take advantage of their distributed nature. Right? There's very few places in the world where you can get, if you look at Azure, for instance, 58 different data centers around the world with high-speed network between them. That, if you try to do that yourself, it would be on the order of millions and millions of dollars, and we only have to take advantage of a portion of that to realize significant savings. And then I think, as this year, Brian highlighted, this year has taught us that we have to be relatively responsive when it comes to unexpected IT challenges, and in this case, remote work. We like to joke, I came from the virtual desktop side, as C-Rod did, that we used to be well within the top 50 for any CIO, maybe number 41 or 42, and now remote work is something that I think everybody talks about to some degree, and then how you support that is part of the future. So I did want to talk about some of the products today. Our job today is to give you a survey of all the different capabilities NetApp can bring to the table. And then if you have interest, obviously the folks at Razor know all this technology from our side very well. Then we can explore one of those, and follow-ups from there. But the idea is to give you an idea of what we've been up to, and how we use it. So this is the world according to NetApp on the cloud side. Used to be very few products. As C-Rod mentioned, that we started growing from the obvious point where we took our storage knowledge and expertise and migrated that to the cloud. Because if you think about it, the 3 public clouds tend to be relatively service-based, which makes sense, but the ability to vary the service level and the capability isn't something that's come natively to them. So for instance, when they do storage, they all started with a generic SAN, and then they added some capabilities on top of that, but it's not as feature rich as you'd be used to do if you ran your own data center or you ran on-prem. But then if you take that and extend it into other use cases within the cloud, it's just not storage, but it's also compute in its specific use cases I'll talk about here in remote work and virtual desktops in a second. But things like data protection, things about compliance. There's a lot of areas where if there is a product in any of the public clouds, it's relatively raw in terms of a service. And it doesn't have the capability to vary based on the varying needs of a business over the course of a day or over the course of a fiscal year. So the NetApp focus here is to provide capability to efficiently use all these services in the public clouds, but then apply them to specific use cases. So from my perspective, because they came with the virtual desktop service, we look at this as a pretty great collection of capability that needs to be molded into a finished service. And if you think about virtual desktops, they're a great promise for making situations like remote work much more manageable by, again, a smaller group of users. As Brian mentioned, finding IT professionals with the credentials and with the experience is becoming tougher and tougher. So one of our jobs is to try and make it as efficient for the administrators to do all the tasks that we need to. But virtual desktops touch on a lot of different areas: user identity, user authentication, storage, creating and managing the virtual machines, making sure that the data is protected and accessible, making sure the performance and the session capabilities are usable experiences or comfortable experiences for the end user. We are introducing a network run into the situation, so we're competing against that physical device. We still want the virtual desktop to have the same or similar capability for the end user experience. So from a virtual desktop point of view, we have a service called VDS that I'll talk about in a second, but we rely on things like the cloud storage products, Azure NetApp Files in Azure, Cloud Volumes ONTAP, and Cloud Volumes Service in the other public clouds allow us to have that differentiated storage layer. We can change capacity on the fly, we can change throughput on the fly, and we have the ability to add services to those. Things like Cloud Backup Service allow us to back up the data. The compliance component I talked about allows us to scan the data for any of the restricted information, social security numbers, bank accounts, that type of thing. And if you think about it, virtual desktops is one of those use cases that usually kind of falls farther down that list, because we target our applications, especially our databases, to make sure that if we have sensitive data, we store those encrypted at rest and all that type of thing. But invariably, you find that one use case that gets all the publicity of an employee that downloaded the employee list or the customer list with bank accounts just because they wanted to take it home for the weekend to get caught up on work. That lone file, that Excel file or something like that, could live out in their virtual desktop in their My Desktop situation, for instance, and it wouldn't typically get caught. Whereas cloud compliance can run right against our virtual desktop service and see all those capabilities. So there is interaction with some of these components so that we have the ability to see and support data protection, disaster recovery, compliance. All the stuff you typically build onto a storage layer are now just add-on features to the services that are running natively in each one of the clouds. You may have heard of our recent acquisition called Spot on this compute side. And the whole idea there is that as we consume more and more compute in these clouds, there is some differentiation between capability and cost. So for instance, in Azure, I have 4 purchase choices. I can choose to pay as you go. I can choose 1-year instances, 3-year instances on the reserve side, and then I can choose a preemptible instance or a Spot instance that allows Azure to take that instance back if they need it. And that sort of disparity in price can be as much as 60% between a pay-as-you-go instance all the way down to the Spot instance. So what Spot does is it has 5 years of cloud data, and it knows what the preemptive patterns are typically for each one of the public clouds. It also knows, because it does an analyzer, it knows what you're using in terms of compute in the cloud, and it can marry those two capabilities to say, okay, if you need 10 more machines or 20 more machines, this is a very efficient way to allocate those and then purchase those. Maybe 6 of those are using reserved instances, 2 of them are using Spot instance, and 2 are pay-as-you-go. And you can vary that over time. So if you think about the nature of how we used to do this, very static, very get the configuration up and running, the clouds really favor the ability to dynamically change not only your configuration, how many machines, how much storage, but also to vary how you're paying for that and how long you're agreeing to pay for that, so that you optimize the price side of it as well. So Spot's being introduced in a number of products on the NetApp side. It was acquired about 2 months ago. And then for my team, the virtual desktop service, because a lot of our virtual desktops are variable size pools of VMs, Spot will become an interesting component to help us optimize the spend even more so than what we do today. So when we start talking about the synergy of the products on the NetApp side, we're really focused on taking specific use cases, virtual desktop, for instance, and applying all of our tools to make sure that we're doing that in a cost efficient way, but also to give administrators the capability to take advantage of some of the unique characteristics of the public cloud versus the on-prem purchase mode. The last thing I'll say on this piece is that I've never had I've been doing this for over 6 years. I've never run into a situation where we were able to stand up the new public cloud instance for things like virtual desktops and have everybody move in 12 hours. Typically, it's a longer term project. Typically, there's a migration plan involved, and moving the data is typically the long pole in the tent in terms of time, because there could be a lot of data that we have to move. So we have tool sets like Cloud Sync that allow us to move data very quickly from either on-prem or other clouds into the new cloud, and then get that reorganized and apply the permissions and security that we need to do on the top of that. So there's a lot of information here, a lot of different services. Just wanted to give you a sort of a high-speed overview of all the capability that we have. We are, thinking up new ideas of how to use some of this capability, but it really comes down to business use case. What's your problem? What's the technology that you're trying to apply? What's your cloud of choice, and how does that interact with what you're doing today on either an on-prem or a private data center footprint? How do all those pieces come together? And then obviously, as Brian said at the top, Razor can help you walk through that from an architectural, from a service point of view, so that you get the architecture right. Because with a lot of these components, if you think through the structure up front, you typically have a more efficient use on the back end. I'll touch on virtual desktop service in detail here for just one slide. The goal for virtual desktop service, whether you choose the RDS functionality, the older Microsoft approach, or the new Windows virtual desktop setup, we provide the automation orchestration for some of the big buckets of tasks. So deployment is typically the biggest headache up front. As I mentioned, you have to get the virtual machines, the storage layer, the networking, the security, all those components need to be done in a way that serves the current situation, but is also scalable as you add employees or add locations, and VDS handles all that capability automatically. It runs as a web application up in Azure. It also has a corresponding REST API so that you can build that into a bigger orchestration if you choose to. And once we've got everything deployed, we do the typical end user administration stuff. We let you focus on user management, application lifecycle, so installs, updates, deletes. We handle the scaling of the machines and the storage layers so that you are only consuming the resources that you need. It also allows us to provide extensive tools for administrators to add their own workflows and automation by a part of the product that we call scripted events. It allows the administrators to use our system and our security context and our knowledge of the virtual desktop environment to activate things like PowerShell, Chocolatey, or even the playbooks like Puppet and Chef. We can be the trigger point for a customized workflow that administrators design for their particular environment. And then as we look at the overall picture, not everybody runs in one cloud. And as I said, not everybody's going to move all of their users to the cloud overnight. So we provide the administrators the capability to administer remotely different environments. So the public clouds, as well as C-Rod will talk about, we have the capability to administer on-prem situations running on either our HCI or pretty much any vSphere environment is supported. So you have the capability to bridge the current environment, but as you think about moving to the cloud, we can do both of those pieces as well. So VDS is a service that is a tool set that end user administrators rely on, but also allows us to extend into and use all the other products I talked about without the administrator having to know all of those capabilities. The deployment typically does the configuration and management of those and handles some of the complexity of multiple sites and then scaling up to thousands and thousands of users. So that's the sort of the focal point for us on the use case for end users, and you'll see more and more use cases from the NetApp family of products as we focus on sort of the big ticket tasks that organizations tend to run into. Other areas are already sort of in play, ERP, so SAP certification types, things like that. We do have some pretty good use case stories as well. One last thing to summarize, why use VDS? What are the capabilities? What's the value proposition for it? We see it in effectively three buckets. One is that deployment consistency and the ability to not have to worry about all the small details. We handle the construction and the configuration on the back end without a lot of interaction at the service level. We ask questions that allow us to do all that piece. The second piece is the administrative component, the day-to-day management, handling both the tasks that typically go along with managing virtual desktops, but also the tasks that typically get generated when a user is having trouble with their session. Just because they've moved to a remote environment doesn't mean that they're not going to file tickets and have issues. So we try and give the administrators the best tool set to see that. And then the last piece is the efficiency, as I talked about. The dynamic nature of the cloud means that we have to be dynamic with our tool set, and we scale up components, compute, storage as we need it, but then also know when to scale it back down and how to not impact users if we have to if we have to use variable amounts of each one of those resources. Do want to mention one additional product on the cloud side. The global file cache product was also a purchase, a company called Talon in the spring. And the use cases here are pretty much focused on three things: consolidation of SMB-based data, so those file servers that might be spread out in different locations. A lot of companies are looking at that model and saying, okay, I'm not going to have as many branch offices. I may not have any branch offices at all, as people tend to work from home now over a longer period of time. But they want to start consolidating some of that data and use the capabilities of the cloud to put that in one place, but make it accessible to a large geographic area if we need to. The second big use case is for large files, as we're trying to share stuff from home. If we have like engineering firms or graphics firms that have large files that run in the gigabytes, that can be challenging because you have to wait for it to download every time. That's not very efficient. So the ability to use global file cache to store that in one place and then cache it locally is very helpful. And the third piece is also related to our virtual desktop product. We can use the GFC product to move user profiles between locations without any interaction from the administrator or from the end user. As a rule, typically with virtual desktops, we try and keep the data and the applications as close to the users as possible. And GFC allows us to have the best of both worlds. We can keep the session servers and the data very close to the user in terms of Azure or Google region. But at the same time, if a user happens to move between locations, GFC allows us to have the user profile follow them and get picked up within the location without them having to do anything on the back end. So it's a very straightforward use case for that. And I want to point out one thing on the Cloud Insights side. As I mentioned, we're integrating it with VDS, but we're also integrating it with more of our products. The whole idea with Cloud Insights is that it can be a data collector from a lot of different sources. So public cloud APIs, in the case of virtual desktop service, it can collect from that API. It can actually get data from the machines themselves. So if you have perfmon data that you want to submit, it can also monitor application level, so SQL Server, storage, pretty much anything that can generate a data stream that shows its condition. Cloud Insights gives you the capability to collect that data for trend analysis. So what's the data look like over time, as well as alerting. It's, this particular machine, if its CPU is above 90% for 2 hours at a stretch, I want to get a notification. So Cloud Insights, because it has a universal capability to collect data, also can act as a data picture for administrators who are trying to administer things in the cloud or even on-prem and need a good snapshot of what's going on to drive their troubleshooting capability. As well as on the financial side, we want to keep track before the Azure bill or the GCP or AWS bill ends up on the desk at the end of the month. We'd like to have a running total for that so we can keep track of that. So you'll see Cloud Insights play a bigger role in the NetApp family of products. But if you have stuff you want to try and create a monitoring picture or a data picture from, Cloud Insights is a very powerful product for that. And that's pretty much the cloud side. I do want to turn it off to C-Rod. I'm going to enjoy some more of my coffee and listen to his survey of our other products.
Hey, Mike, sorry about that.
That audio is always challenging.
Yeah,
more coffee.
Yeah, well, I have my coffee here, so, but you're right, I need to drink some more. So multitasking, obviously. So let's get started with hybrid cloud environments. So my name is Chris Rodriguez. Mike and I work together. They call me C-Rod at NetApp. Been doing VDI for 13 years at NetApp, and been working with Citrix since 1990 and Horizon View since its creation in 2005, 2006. And I've worked with a slew of other companies over the years in VDI, and now I'm focused on what we call our modern workplace that Mike showed, and it was an excellent depiction of it. But let's talk about on-prem. Since I've been at NetApp for such a long time, I've been working with our on-prem products for a long time. So hold a second. Let's see. Okay, there's so much changes. Okay, good, thanks. So those of you that are NetApp customers, you're probably familiar with our ONTAP product on-prem, right? So you're familiar with All Flash Fast or our Fast product lines. And they're very stable, been around for many years, very mature, the leader in the industry. We set the SPC1 benchmark on-prem with our AFF A700, and we set the SPC3 benchmarks with our A800. So we do have the fastest storage, flash storage out there. In addition to that, we are a major and the primary vendor for flash, and Fiber Channel, according to Gartner. So you know that we have the maturation and the maturity and stability on that side of the fence. What we did was we took our very popular operating system called ONTAP, and we took our storage arrays and we moved them into the cloud and worked with our cloud partners like Azure, AWS, and GCP, Google, right? So we give our customers the capabilities of doing multiple different options. And this is one of the options, what we call Cloud Volumes ONTAP. Well, Cloud Volumes ONTAP is a full-blown operating system that you're used to using on your storage array, moved to the cloud. And the benefit of Cloud Volumes ONTAP is it sits up above the cloud's file systems. Next slide, please. So we use a manager called Cloud Manager to manage it. If you haven't seen Cloud Manager in a while, it was a couple of years since I've seen it, and I started playing with it about 3 months ago. It has really matured. Now, here's the benefit of Cloud Volumes ONTAP and using the GUI with Cloud Manager from a cloud-based portal base, is Cloud Volumes ONTAP allows you to apply storage efficiencies like deduplication and compression and others prior to writing it to the cloud file system. So you get to save on capacity in the cloud immediately, okay? But the cool thing is it uses SnapMirror, it uses all the tools that we're used to that allows you to sync back to your data on-prem with your NetApp storage arrays, okay? Our friends at Razor know this product really well. They can help you implement it, and it's a phenomenal product. If you haven't played with it yet, I would recommend you guys get a sandbox with CVO and play with it and bring along VDS as well and watch how it works with CVO because it can apply. You can also test out our Azure NetApp files too that Mike talked about a little bit on the system. Next slide, please. So here's an illustration of what I was just describing about applying the storage efficiencies before it gets written to the cloud file systems. So say you're in the cloud right now, say you're in Azure and you're using Azure files or Azure Premium files, okay? Well, who's benefiting from the storage efficiencies is the cloud provider, okay? They keep the margin on that. You don't get to see that. You get charged for the whole capacity. What we do is we, again, apply those storage efficiencies and dedupe, and we dedupe by block. While everybody else in the industry does it by file, we do it by block. So we're going to save you a lot. There's going to be a whole lot more blocks, 4K blocks that are identical than there will be files identical. So we'll save millions and millions. We advertise anywhere between 300 and 800% capacity savings because it's a 3-to-1 to up to an 8-to-1 depending upon what you're deduping, okay, and what your storage efficiency are. And again, with Cloud Volumes ONTAP, it happens prior to writing it to the cloud system, so the cloud providers charge you for a lot less. Next, please. So Frank Anderson, who's on our team with Mike and I and others on the Managed Workplace team and the Azure Business Group team, he did a reference architecture and did some testing. He tested up to 500 users with login VSI. For those who are familiar with VDI, you know that that's an industry standard testing tool in VDI. Many vendors, I have worked with it for many years, and many vendors use it. And so it's acknowledged as the standard tool for VDI, and he tested it in the cloud in Azure. And what he found was typical typical metrics that we normally find with VDI. Session-based, this was with Windows Virtual Desktop. Session-based VDI, which is what WVD is, it's based on Windows 10. The IOPS are about 3 to 4 IOPS per user. In this case, I think it came out right at about 4 IOPS per user. But a little bit different in the cloud versus on-prem. On-prem, we're used to seeing 80% writes and 20% reads. Here you saw 60% writes and 40% reads in the cloud. Okay, but you can see the metrics are very similar, and so this you can size. But one of the benefits he got from this was he found that he was able to get a 30% increase of usage and performance with AMD processors in the compute nodes in Azure versus using other brands. So, and by the way, I have actually run this by with others, their customers that are testing it. They're finding the same thing, about 30 to 35% increase of number of users on a host, a WVD host. Very, very positive. Next slide. So we take those metrics, and we already have tons of reference architectures and white papers posted online for on-prem, especially with our HCI product or our ONTAP product, our all-flash fast. And we take those metrics in the cloud and combine them, and we can easily manage. Can you mute out whoever's in the background? Thank you. And we can easily manage desktops and users either on-premise or in the cloud. Now, you look at this block diagram here. On the left side of on-premise, you'll see that our NetApp HCI can be one of the products, and our all-flash fast. I normally do not recommend putting VDI sessions on our spinning disk, our fast product line, okay, FAS. I recommend that you use our SSDs for performance and sub-millisecond latency access time, which is our all-flash fast product. That's why I have the picture of AFF there. The only requirement is vSphere 6.7 or 7.0 for on-prem, okay? So say you are another server vendor and you don't want to use our HCI. Our HCI is known for simplicity, and it's a 3-tier architecture, but it has the simplicity of HCI. But say you have a standard already in your shop and you go with some other server vendor, some other compute node. Well, you can use our ONTAP storage, our all-flash fast, and the only requirement is for those compute nodes is you need to run vSphere 6.7 or 7.0. Now we do use, if you notice in the box where it says EUC components, you'll see it says RDS user sessions. That stands for Microsoft's Remote Desktop Service. So we use RDS on-prem. And in the cloud, up in Azure, as Mike mentioned, with Windows Virtual Desktop, that's what we use typically in Azure. Now, if you're going to be cloud agnostic and you're going to run VDI sessions in Google or in AWS with our product, with our virtual desktop product, that would be with RDS as well. Okay. And by the way, the testing, we're in the process of doing a reference architecture to test this exact same picture that I have out right now. And we've got some preliminary testing with on-prem, and it's a phenomenal response time. Same type of response, 3 to 4 IOPS per user with less than 1 millisecond latency. By the way, when Frank did his testing, if you notice on those graphs, we had actually a third of a millisecond latency as the average. There were some spikes that went up to 9/10 of a millisecond, but everything was below a millisecond latency. So the cloud storage is very, very fast, our cloud storage. Next slide, please. So these are some resources that you can go pull information down. Best place to go if you want to learn about our virtual desktop service is, first of all, go to Razor, and Razor can help you and assist you. The team at Razor can help you and assist you. But if you want to do some extra reading above and beyond, you can go to cloud.netapp.com, and we have all types of tools and documentation there. We have calculators, an Azure calculator that will show you exactly what it's going to cost to run so many desktops in that environment. Okay. We also have it for Google Cloud, and then we have a TCO calculator. But our friends at Razor, they're very familiar with all our reference architectures and our documentation. If you want to explore it on-premise, you already have NetApp storage, and you want to go ahead and try out virtual desktop service, you can do it real easy, and the team at Razor will help you facilitate that, and they'll get the technical reports and the white papers that you need associated with that. If you want to try it out in the cloud, we have what we call a sandbox. And it's very easy. You can jump on our sandbox. That's some of you may know it as lab on demand in the past is what we used to call it. But in the cloud team, we call it our sandbox, our cloud sandbox for virtual desktop service. And it's a very efficient and easy process to get started with. Okay, next slide. And that ends our presentation. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Brian at Razor and let him finish off. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I guess first of all, is there any questions or comments anybody wants to pose to the group?
We can also have them type in chat if people just want to post it there as well.
I guess the other thing I'd like to ask is, I know we're engaged with a lot of folks on the WVD front. Has anybody started to investigate that and run some of these TCO numbers against running it internally? Curious what you're finding to be pretty good view.
Yeah, I think from our end, looking at the WVD product launch was about a year ago. Was in public preview for a little while before that. But I think a year plus worth of data and information. I think the licensing as part of the Microsoft 365 bundles, as well as the price optimization. If you run WVD in Azure, you pay the non-Windows OS price per hour. Really make it cost effective as an approach. And I think the big challenge for folks has been trying to scale it quickly. Because we ran into a lot of places that were doing proof of concepts, proof of value for, say, anything from 100 to 400 users they were trying out in a department or a location, and then COVID hit, and everybody's looking at 8x, 10x the number of users, and they had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how do I make sure the architecture holds up, especially as you look at different locations, as I mentioned at the top. So I think C-Rod has a great way of phrasing this, that we went through the panic phase in the spring, and now people are reevaluating this. And part of that is truly just the financial side. You can't run 7x24 and still get the per user cost to a point where the budget can stand it for a full 12 months or 18 months or however long we're going to be running at elevated remote work employee counts. I think that's something that people are taking into account now as they look forward. The good news is that you can continuously optimize these environments. The configuration isn't fixed. It's not like that you can't change the environment. It's just a question of looking at what your goals are and then trying to predict what your utilization is going to be. I fully realize that could be highly variable next year, but you can plan for worst case and then best case from there.
Hey, Brian, I'll tell you one question I get a lot of times from customers is what differentiates us from standard VDI companies that are out there? And I'll address that. First of all, what Mike has already presented on and what he mentioned just now is cost. We're going to be easily half the cost of those other competitors, if not more, versus on-prem, especially on-prem as well as in the cloud. You got to keep in mind Microsoft's Windows Virtual Desktop, they don't charge for their software. If you have an A3 or A5 license, there's no charge for it. If you have an E3 or E5 license, there's no charge for the software. So if you compare it to the other competitors out there, every user that you come on board, so if you have 500 users, 200 users, 2,000 users, you have to pay what we call a Microsoft Client Access List price, a CAL price, and that's $200 retail MSRP per user. So that cuts that out immediately. And then in addition to that, Mike talked about, and I would say the second most important differentiator that really sets us apart and really puts us way ahead of the competition is the slide that Mike showed with all the components that makes up NetApp's modern workplace. Okay, we just don't have VDI. We have it all because it's all so important to you. So we have storage. If you don't have fast lightning storage, you're going to have problems. We have the capability to save you costs on the compute node in the cloud with Spot. And we're so confident in that product, we don't charge for the software. We charge you monthly based upon the percentage of savings that we bring to you. We charge 28% of the total savings. So if we save you $5,000 in a month, we get a percentage of that savings. So, and then again, we have virtual desktop service that makes it simple to orchestrate. It integrates with all the products that he had on that list. We have monitoring available, typically with other large companies, VDI companies. You have to go buy third-party monitoring to do it efficient. You know, one of the 3, 4, 5 out there. You know, Liquid Labs or Control Up or Lakeside Software. You know, all those guys. They're great friends of mine. I've known them for a long time, but you know, they've made a living off of, for the last 20 years, 30 years, off of being able to supply true monitoring for VDI for those other companies. We have it built in. We have a dashboard in our Cloud Insights product, and which, by the way, Cloud Insights has 20 to 30 different dashboards out there. It can monitor Apache servers, it can monitor storage, obviously, and in the cloud as well as on-prem. So, you know, having that capability of all, including backup, you know, we have SaaS backup that'll back up all your Office 365 products, including email and attachments in the cloud, as well as, and then it'll also as well back up Teams. So we have all that capability. So that's what differentiates us, is we have the full picture, okay? When you look at VDI, you just can't look at just the VDI software alone, you know? You have to look at everything that you have to deliver that, whether it's infrastructure on-prem or whether it's cloud and the components you need in cloud. So I would say, Brian, that's a real big question I get all the time. You know, how are we differentiated than the others? And that slide that Mike showed and he spoke to on all the products and all the components, that's the big differentiator.
Thanks for that. I didn't see anything else come into the chat. Does anybody want to chime in, or?
I will say one thing more that Mike also touched on a little bit is, so I do a lot of forecasting with VDI just because I'm an old man and I've seen things over time, and I can see repetitive stuff pretty easily in the VDI environment. And so the first thing I forecasted when COVID hit in November in China and January is I told all our executives that this was getting ready to become a VDI explosion, that everybody was going to have to be forced to work from home, and we needed to jump on now. We had started working on our modern workplace about 3 years ago, so it's not something that was just a knee-jerk reaction to COVID. But I let them know this is going to hit heavy because people are going to have to work from home. So in March, it hit heavy here in the U.S. In February, it hit in Europe. And, you know, sure enough, people had rushed to home, right? Mike has a great story that he tells that he was on a call with a customer about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the customer said, you know, when COVID broke out in March, we had to get everybody remotely. And we did that really quick. But we spent 45% of our total IT budget spend in 1 month, and on for one solution. And so now they're back and reeling and trying to figure out how they can save costs. And they've come to us, to NetApp, to see how we can help them save costs, right? And so the phase 2 was, you know, phase 1 was get everybody up and working as quick as possible in the cloud. And then the second one was, phase 2 was, you know, now that people are working from home, we want to keep a percentage of people working from home. So let's have a long-term strategy. And that probably occurred around May timeframe, May, June. And now today, what I'm seeing, and I've been on calls with customers for the last 2 weeks, and every one of them is emphasizing cost. Many of the universities in North America their budgets have been cut by 8% to 20%. I was just on a slew of calls with universities, a presentation with them, and that's what they're relating to us. So I know a lot of you customers out there are challenged with cost, and the products we showed you can help you reduce your IT spend tremendously. I've had people tell me, oh, well, we looked at VDI in the cloud, and it didn't make sense. It was cheaper for us to do it on-prem. And I kind of giggled when I've had customers tell me that. I said, really? I said, because we've done the same analysis with our IT, and we have about 10,000 users, VDI users globally, worldwide. And I said, we have contractors, we have, you know, vendors, everything, partners that come into our system with VDI. And I said, when our IT did the analysis, including labor, it came out to about $125 per desktop per user, right? If you did it on premise. If you do it in the cloud, it comes out to about $65 per user per desktop. And so I'm like, you must have, when you did your comparison, you must not have compared labor, because what the cloud vendors are doing, obviously, is they're co-opting the labor across multiple different customers. So, but the cool thing is, we're not biased towards cloud or on-prem. We are biased on helping your customers or our customers make it an easy transition to the cloud, as Mike has mentioned. So that's why the hybrid cloud approach, where you can run users on-prem and then slowly migrate them to the cloud, is really nice. And Mike talked about all the different products with Cloud Sync and stuff that we have capabilities to do that with. So Brian, that's all I got. Thank you.
That sounds great, C-Rod. Mike, you too? Okay. Well, for everybody that attended, thank you. You'll see a little follow-up in the next day or two come out to you. And, we appreciate your time. Any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on our team, and we'll be glad to help. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for the time. Thanks for the coffee, guys.
Ditto on that. It was awesome coffee. Nice Mike too.